Hey everybody, welcome to the Entheo show, coming to you from the ground in your favorite county of Washtenaw. I'm Jim, welcome your hosts, Michael File, Colin McDougall, and Ann Bannister.
I just want to bounce just for a minute.
Welcome to the special 4/20/26. We're way on point. It's not because it was 4/20. But yeah, welcome.
Welcome everyone. We have a great show today for you. We got some special guests. First, we're going to get in with Kelsey Taylor. She's going to be joining us pretty soon. She's doing some research at Eastern Michigan.
Yeah, on psychedelic research for recovery. Yeah.
Great. And then after that, we'll be joined by Nick Zettell. He was on the show last week, and he's going to get into a bunch of stuff with us today. You know him as like former student for sensible drug policy, and he's been a hash bash organizer for years. And then after that, we have our Washtenaw County Prosecutor, Eli Savit. We're going to kind of go around the room with him and talk to him about what's going on there. And, he put out entheogenic plant policy in the first couple of days of it being in office, and just want to see what's going on. I know he's got a new PAC, and we're going to try and talk to him about that too. But yeah, I was going to say, if you haven't already, check out last week's episode. We had, like I mentioned, Nick Zettell, but we also had Jamie Lowell, Mark Passerini, Rick Thompson, Dawn Schultz, and they're on behalf of the Hash Bash Steering Committee. We talked about cannabis last week. And if you haven't already checked out the Hash Bash, the virtual Hash Bash, check it out. There's a lot of great different causes in there, and just everyone is really good. Sorry about that.
Hopefully this works, because audio is lagging miserably over there.
Okay. Be on the lookout. Kelsey should be showing up here in the next couple minutes. I can do a couple of news bulletins, guys, real quick.
Yeah. Why don't we do some news?
Yeah, we're going to do that real quick here. Here's some great things, guys, that are going on around the globe. Mineraco Inc., also known as the Magic Mushroom Company, today announced that it has retained a lobbying firm to play an expanded role in the company's lobbying efforts. The firm will be joining forces with Mineraco's government relations staff to decriminalize psilocybin in Detroit, Michigan, and surrounding areas. They specialize in research, production, and distribution of psilocybin mushroom products. That's pretty intense. Rick?
Well, Kelsey's here, but I think this is really exciting. They're also, in that email, they mentioned Shroom Coin. I don't know how many crypto enthusiasts we have in the crowd, but I am definitely getting into Shroom Coin.
It was like for $1. I think it was like 10. I put it in too. It was like $1. It's like 10 Shroom coins, I think. So get it while it's low, like Dogecoin.
Yeah, so we have Kelsey Taylor with us.
Kelsey.
Really Kelsey's passionate about all things wellness, a personal trainer, yoga teacher, massage therapist. Currently in her final semester of graduate school for public health. And she's working on a graduate project, Irb Approved study, really exciting stuff on using psychedelic to aid in recovery from addiction. So really excited to have you here, Kelsey. Welcome.
Thanks for having me, guys. Good to see you all.
Guess, Kelsey, how did you like first get involved, and what made you become passionate about like studying this?
Uh, that's that's a really good question, and it kind of goes back a long ways. My first real healing experiences were through plant medicines, through using cannabis, and through there, I got involved in a really good community that just really perpetuated using nature to heal. And one of the main topics that I'm really passionate about is addiction recovery. It's a really underserved population, and I think psychedelics hold a great potential to be able to meet that need.
Excellent. So I myself have a long history of problematic substance use. My experiences with psychedelic, specifically plant-based entheogens, has have really validated for myself what you're talking about here. What is your experience previous to this in working with people with problematic substance use?
So I did a lot of work. I go to school at Eastern Michigan University, and we had a student organization called Students for Recovery. And I was a part of trying to start a collegiate recovery program at the university, which is actually a fully funded program with a program coordinator, advisor, things like this, to offer support to students that are also in recovery. And through that process, it was a lot of investigation and research to how to be able to support this community. And a lot of what we learned and through my own experience was that, you know, recovering from addiction isn't just one thing. You know, it's not just therapy. It's not just 12-step groups. It's not just one tool. You really need a toolbox and a melange of things to be able to support your recovery. And the psychedelic use, very intentional, can really kind of be a catalyst in starting to create more wellness opportunities and to be able to get back in touch with being able to stay on a path of recovery.
Right on. So I guess Kelsey, what, I'm sorry, I hear like audio really bad when I speak. Am I like, do I sound strange or anything? Okay.
I definitely hear the echo, but it's not too bad.
Okay. Are you going about like your study right now? Is it like a survey, and like how can people like share it and spread the word, I suppose?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. It is an IRB approved survey, which means that the Institutional Review Board for Eastern, or the Ethics Committee, reviewed it and made sure that it was safe to ask the questions that I'm asking and to survey these populations. I do have a link I can drop in the chat for you to be able to share it. It's a short survey, only I think 28 questions, and it's very brief, just asking about if you've been in recovery, what things that you've tried. Have you done 12-step groups? Have you gotten any kind of traditional treatment methods? And then if you've used psychedelics, what has that experience been? You know, what substance, what helped you find some sustained recovery through the use of psychedelics? And that what were any barriers to that treatment. I'm really interested in finding out how to make psychedelic treatment more available. And that's the main goal of this survey, is to find out what have been the barriers for people that have used use psychedelics as a treatment, and in what areas did they run into problems being able to do that. Accessibility issues, stigma issues, all the different things that can create barriers to treatment, so we can then create programming to try to reduce those barriers and make it more accessible to people.
So an important part of my own, I mean, I'm going to take the survey, but I mean, we've got you right here. For myself, one of the most important pieces outside of, development of a good support system, for me, that was the most important thing. Then finding things to distract my time that would have been use. That was getting a job again, moving a house so I wasn't in the same environment anymore, so I could retrain myself. It took a lot of uprooting what I was used to, but if I didn't have that support system, that uprooting could have never happened. But in terms of psychedelic experience, I obviously I totally understand and support the idea of psychedelic therapy, but for myself, the idea of doing it in a therapeutic setting or in a, any sort of watched setting, I've done Bufo and had other types of ceremonies where I've had a space holder, but for psilocybin specifically, an important part of the experience was I was doing that myself and I didn't need to be caught like that. And some people definitely do. Some people definitely need that space holder. And let me throw that right out there before everybody's experience, lived and psilocybin is going to be very different. But for me, not being in that setting, being in a setting where I could freely explore whatever I wanted, for the first time, the world was available to me and had been in front of me the whole time. I just was completely freaking unaware. And the idea to me, like, I know for some people that therapy setting is crucial, because if you leave them alone, they're not going to go the right way. And I find the therapy to be more the integration end of things for me. Follow through, and if it's not even with a therapist, just with your support system, talking about your experience, getting that out and digging to the trauma you found and understanding it. But I just guess it's not really a question. I kind of want your thoughts on like this whole clinical setting versus, the more traditional setting. We've been using these substances for thousands of years. And yeah, I'd love that perspective.
Yeah, and I love that you bring that up, because it really is so important. The reason, everybody's pain is different, which means everybody's healing needs to be different. And that's something that's explored in the survey. If you're taking it, if you're in a clinical setting, or if you're in a ceremonial setting, or you're at home, or you're in nature, the set and setting with any kind of psychedelic use is very important. And like you mentioned with the support system, folks in recovery, specifically abstinence-focused recovery, like traditional AA or NA groups, they kind of push back on using any substances. So it may be it's very important to develop a support system that supports whatever your recovery looks like for you. If that means that you're microdosing psilocybin, or you're doing ayahuasca ceremonies, whatever it is, you need to find people that will hold that space for you, whether it is, clinicians or groups of people, part of psychedelic societies that understand plant medicine and its role in people's lives. And the preparation and integration for any psychedelic use is really the most important part of it. Psilocybin and any other psychedelic substances are not magic pills. They're not something that you can do and your problems are solved and you're healed. There's a lot of work that comes along with using this medicine, and it really just kind of works as a microscope that helps highlight where you can focus your attention to do that work. And if you are going to be doing any sort of healing, you need all the things that come along with that, including, maybe professional support or a group of friends and getting your family involved. People that will support your healing journey, however it manifests for you, because it's different for everybody else.
You actually bring up one of my favorite little slices of history. I've been in and out of NA and AA most of my adult life, usually by order of the court, once or twice on my own, but usually for different problems, mostly alcohol myself. But abstinence-based recovery groups, it's full abstinence. You don't get to smoke weed if you're an alcoholic. You don't get to have a psychedelic experience. Bill W., the founder of the group, when the group was forming, wanted LSD to be part of the program. I know we got Nick Zettell here joining us now. He's always full of fun facts too. So I want to bring him in as well, but I want to hear from you first, Kelsey, and then Nick. Is abstinence-based recovery? I don't know what the question is again, but I want your thoughts on this. Were you aware of Bill W? What's your understanding of that situation and his LSD use?
Absolutely. So that was, they say that AA is a spiritual program, and Bill W. Had a very spiritual experience on LSD. And he wanted to bring that in. And by that point, AA already had a culture around it. And they pushed back even to the guy who created it, because they didn't think it was right to advocate for psychedelic use to people with substance issues. And it really puts a limit on the capacity to be able to experience those altered states where you may be able to reach something new within healing. And that's something that I'm interested in. And it's pretty much the basis of the survey, is that stigma against using psychedelics as a treatment. In the 50s, alcoholism was treated very efficaciously with LSD. It was the main treatment, and with really good results. Same with smoking cessation, like tobacco. People that were using LSD and psilocybin in clinical settings were reporting more abstinence from using psychedelics than any other treatment method. So there is weight behind it, and similar to the fight that cannabis went through to get destigmatized and focus on its medical benefits, was the same thing that psychedelics are going to have to go now. They're working on proving the medical effectiveness for treatment for psychedelic use. And I think that is one of the main barriers that we're going to have to reduce is the stigmatization of psychedelic use. And it's a really powerful thing. Once it's more accepted and more people are on board with it, once it becomes mainstream, just like alcohol and tobacco do, where you can buy almost anywhere of legal age, when really they are much more harmful than psychedelic medicine. So it's really important to educate on this topic. You know, education is one of the main things that can reduce stigma, and just keep preaching that. So
Nick, you've always got fun little pieces of history, but Kelsey really covered, that background that I was digging for in that. But today, now that we're on the LSD topic, is a very important day in LSD history. In fact, it was a Friday, April the 16th. And Albert Hoffman wrote a few days later, last Friday, April 16th, 1943, I was forced to interrupt my work in the laboratory in the middle of the afternoon and proceed home, being affected by remarkable, relentless, combined with a slight dizziness. And he goes on to talk about laying down and how, while he felt intoxicated, it wasn't in a bad way. It was almost pleasurable. And this led to what in a few days will be another fantastic holiday. Nick, welcome to the show. We've had you here before. Run with some history and some facts for us.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I didn't come with any facts prepared, so everything I say should be fact checked. But I really like the segue, and I also had at a point some court mandated NA and AA, Narcotics Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous exposure. And just for a gram or less of cannabis years ago, and I was fortunate to get through the court system and probationary period unscathed. But just because a lot don't. But I remember in a court mandated, substance abuse treatment program that I had to go through for cannabis use. They had us one day watch My Name Is Bill W., which is a dramatized, biopic of Bill W.'s life. It doesn't touch on that at all, and there's a number of other things in it that seemed a little, I don't know, it wasn't helpful at all to view for this course. But I was familiar with that story, and I believe also that Bill W. wrote about a couple of the times he tried DMT, and that's where you can fact check me, because I haven't looked at it in a while. But I remember anecdotally, I brought that up to the substance abuse counselor and tried to explore that with the group. I got shut down immediately. I was reported to my probation officer for, stirring the pot or whatever, and he didn't like that at all. But I've certainly always found LSD itself to be pretty introspective, and it has helped me in understanding some of my other consumption habits, not just limited to alcohol, but even my diet and media consumption as well. Sometimes I've thought very heavily about those things while on LSD. It is exciting that today is April 16th, and Bicycle Day is coming up. So I guess today is really the anniversary of the first time someone experienced the psychoactive effects of LSD, which is really remarkable how far we've come since then, and how far there is still to go. But one other just anecdotal story on the I guess using LSD as an exit drug, or having some sort of reaction from that could lead to a more positive relationship with alcohol. I have a friend who last summer took a very heavy dose, and within, you know, an hour or two of taking a heavy dose, his parents and a couple friends actually showed up at his house for an intervention. And, you know, I don't necessarily know that an intervention is always the most effective means of, you know, encouraging someone to seek recovery. And, you know, I've been a part of one or two, but he really did have a drinking problem, and he's been sober ever since. I somehow, you know, he made it through that without his, you know, parents and friends and family understanding what he was going through at that very moment. But it became such a heavy, pivotal experience that he, you know, just anecdotally, that was something where it kind of crashed down on him. And, you know, but you know, he still uses cannabis, he still uses LSD, and he's hasn't touched alcohol since that day. So just, I think those kind of experiences can speak to the greater impact of the psychoactive properties and what it can actually do. Like Kelsey said, putting things under a sort of microscope, and or even a telescope or whatever it may be, you know, you're able to view things from a different perspective, and that is integral.
I
Sorry if I
appreciate
don't have
that
too many other
inward,
facts.
outward perspective. Colin,
What's up?
I don't have any questions right now, so I'm turning it over to you, and I'm going to disappear for a second.
Oh, okay. Well, then I'm going to turn it over. Jim, do you got anything? I guess I don't know.
Well,
Caught me off guard.
Well, I know I don't think Kelsey's going to stay with us too long. I hope Nick is going to stick around a little bit. I just wanted to ask Kelsey about her IRB approval and what that process was like. How long did it take? And is something like psychedelics, you know, do you have to get special approval for something like that? And how was that? Was it a stigma that you had to deal with, you know, in doing so?
It was quite rigorous. It was a lot of work and a lot of on the other side of it, I appreciate that is what the IRB is here for. That's what their job is to protect human subjects, and paying closer attention and really protecting these protected populations that may be outside the law or have some condition in which taking part in research could affect them in some way. I had to design my questions in such a way that it wouldn't hopefully be very triggering to people if they are actively working in recovery, if they're trying right now to get sober, if they are struggling with addiction right now in a way that wouldn't hurt them or cause them anything. And I had to make sure that there are resources there. So if you are taking the survey and you do feel like you need some support, there are support numbers, different hotlines and things that are available to participants. Also, participants should know that they can stop the survey at any time. If you are taking it and you come across questions that you don't like, you can drop out. And the IRB is, the main point of it is making sure that it's confidential. So this survey is completely anonymous, completely confidential. We're not collecting any personal data, not your name, not your location, not anything. It's a self-paced survey. And there's no, it's hosted by a HIPAA compliant, on a HIPAA compliant platform. So there's no way to even access that. Only I and my advisor, who is a co-researcher, have access to the information on the survey. So the IRB has made it very safe to be able to participate in psychedelic research, which right now, outside of big institutions like Johns Hopkins, things like this, isn't really happening. So this is a really small scale, local survey that you can take part in to kind of further the cause. And especially for my recovery people out there, you can think of it as like, you know, the 12th step of offering service. Just another opportunity to offer healing and help, guidance with other people going through the same thing.
That's great. That's great.
Thanks, Kelsey. I already sent it to someone I know. When will the results, when do you expect for it to be wrapping up and a report come out?
Well, I'm hoping to be able to get enough data to be able to then put something together. So my goal for this is to be able to get at least 25 responses, which hopefully is attainable even just in our small community here. And once I have that data, I'll be able to analyze it and then offer recommendations for education and program planning to reduce the stigma around using psychedelics as a treatment option, and to be able to really be able to reduce barriers so more people have access, even just through education, so people know that it is an efficacious treatment and that it's working for people.
Awesome. Hey, Kelsey, do you have any departing words or anything? It's really great to have you on the show, and thank you so much for your work.
And thank you for having me. I think this was just so special to be able to get the word out and be able to talk with people who understand. So I really appreciate, you know, this platform and all the work that this show and, you know, members of the Michigan Psychedelic Society and everyone else are doing to be able to make this more accessible to people. And I'm just really grateful to be a part of it. So thank you.
Thanks, Kelsey.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Kelsey.
Thanks,
Great to see you, Kelsey.
Hi, Nick. Hi, Nick.
Peace.
Zettell. So, Nick, you were once president of SSDP, Students for Sensible Drug Policy at University of Michigan. It's come a long way since then. Can you speak on that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I think I can. So once upon a time, I was the chapter leader or the president. That my involvement with the actual chapter started in 2009. The chapter itself was formed in 2007 by Chris Childs. And the national org, I think, was founded in 1998, and specifically in response to the federal aid elimination penalty in the Higher Education Act, which basically said if you got a drug conviction, you couldn't get federal aid to go to school. So I'm sure a lot of people know people who had to drop out or transfer or couldn't go to school because they picked up a marijuana charge or any drug charge. But I got involved in the fall of 2009 and stuck with it. And I think every year since its foundation, 2007, it was, you know, SSDP was involved in some way with Hash Bash and the reserving of the diag for that, and hosting a couple other rallies here and there. But that was my inlet into the medical marijuana community. You know, medical marijuana had just passed in November of 2008, and so it was really, you know, it obviously already had a lot of grassroots traction, and the people that made it a reality in 2008, you know, were forming a community that was growing and growing. And so it was really a privilege to be involved with that at the onset of the Michigan Medical Marijuana Act. So, and Ann Arbor was a pretty happening spot for a lot of the activism, and I kind of came full circle in 2018 when I actually got employed by the national group to coordinate with chapters on different get out the vote actions, and I know Mike Williams and the Ferris State chapter just absolutely crushed it. They were really one of our bread and butter on that campaign, so that was awesome. But even now, I think Michigan, the state, has a really beautiful and active student base, and base of young people who are involved with these kind of these efforts, and the forward thinking that really comes from advancing drug policy, and also further does advance some of these policies. So it's a great organization, and I'm happy to have and privileged to have been a part of it for so long. Almost 12 years now. So.
Been lucky enough to have Eli Savit, Washtenaw County Prosecutor, join us today. Last time, I'm not in Washtenaw County, but last time we spoke was actually on Jazz Cabbage Cafes. So I'm excited to get to meet you again, talk to you some more. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Yeah, this is exciting. For those of you that don't know, Eli is one of the most amazing prosecutors in this country. Really, you've only been there you were elected in November, or you took seat in November?
No, I was elected in November and took office January 1st.
Okay. So not even 4 full months yet. And I've seen the list of things you've been doing. I'm really excited to hear about some of your experiences with the ACLU and stuff. They're one of my favorite groups to collaborate with. But your history is just, as soon as Jim sent to me, you worked with Sandra Day O'Connor and RGB, and like, whoa. Can you tell us a little bit about this experience? Was working with these women part of what made you where you are today, or like have you always kind of been that way and that was the obvious choice?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think my experiences working for and learning from both Justice O'Connor and Justice Ginsburg really set a path that has led me to where I am today. So I clerked for both Justice Ginsburg and retired Justice O'Connor during 2014 and 2015, and I'll explain a little bit about that. Justice Ginsburg was sort of my full-time boss, and was she was on the court and she was active at the time, and so I helped her out as clerks do with the full gamut of the court's work. I also had the tremendous opportunity to actually be dual assigned in Justice O'Connor's chambers, and she was of course retired at the time, but she still was giving speeches and writing law review articles, and I got a chance to help her out on some of her special projects around civic education, which is something that's very close to my heart as a former 8th grade U.S. history teacher. And really, both these incredible women, the first 2 female justices ever to serve on the United States Supreme Court, helped shape my career path. Starting with Justice O'Connor. Justice O'Connor, she was in Washington, D.C., where my office was, and I was working in the Supreme Court building. She was in Washington, D.C., maybe about once a month. At this point, she was spending a lot of time in Arizona. And from the moment that I started my position with her, she was always really interested in what I was doing next. It was like one of the first things that she would ask me, and she would ask me to get up really early and have breakfast with her in chambers. She was an early riser, and so breakfast was about 7 a.m. On those days. And she would always ask, one of the first things she'd be like, so have you thought about what you're doing next after this? And I was like, well, I just started this job. It's a year-long gig. But she always really encouraged me to go into public service. And the reason for that was, she was actually, she was 3rd in her class at Stanford Law School. Should have been able to get a super high-paying job at a law firm, but at the time they weren't hiring women. And she ended up having to go as, one of the top people in her class at one of the top universities in the world, having to go sort of door to door in Arizona begging for a job because so many people just wouldn't hire women. And she ended up getting a job at the district attorney's office in Arizona. Only, they couldn't deny that she was qualified, but what they told her was, you can't work here because we don't have space for you. We don't have a place for you to sit. And she had already talked to the secretary, and she said, don't worry about it. I'm bringing my own chair, and I'll share space with the secretary. And so that's how she got her foot in the door, despite all of her immense qualifications and brilliance in the law. But she believed that that was one of the best things that ever happened to her, believe it or not, because it launched her in a career in public service. She ended up running for office and serving as a legislator in Arizona, and then a state court judge, and then of course was appointed the first female justice on the United States Supreme Court. And she always told me, Ellie, public service is the best work because you are really making a difference. So she was very encouraging of going back to Michigan, where I'm born and raised, and getting into public service, which is what I ended up doing. With Justice Ginsburg is somebody who has spent her entire life using the law to fight for what she believes is right. Even if she had never become a Supreme Court justice, she would be an icon in American history because through her brilliance and her litigation strategy, she basically got women's rights enshrined in the Constitution as a litigant, right? Just as a lawyer before she ever became a judge. And she took that spirit with her and kept it with her over the many decades that she was a judge and a justice on the Supreme Court. She took the view that it was a powerful tool, and it could be used to promote equity, to promote fairness and justice. But she also knew that it could be used the other way. And she always kept the individual human beings front and center in everything that she did. I remember one of the things that left the deepest impression on me. I was working with Justice Ginsburg late one night. She was the opposite of Justice O'Connor. She would get up super late and roll into work at around maybe 2:00 p.m. But then she'd stay up working until 4 or 5 in the morning. And if you were working with her on something, you were staying there with her. So it was late one Friday night. And I was working with her on a case, going back and forth, giving her the materials that she needed, giving her memos, and it was later in the evening, and we were some of the only people in the building, and she was working on a different case. It wasn't even a case that was mine, and I gave her the last thing that she needed on the case we were working on together. And she just started talking about the human beings, the individuals that were at the center of this Supreme Court case. And how unjust it was, what happened to them, and how it was going to affect their lives, and how, as she thought about the case, she was going to do everything possible to make sure that justice was done for this individual human being. This wasn't a case that, was a major one. It wasn't one of the front page of the New York Times cases, but she was just consumed by the injustice of what had happened to an individual. And she talked to me for just about a half an hour. Again, it wasn't even my case. It was assigned to one of my co-clerks about how unfair and unjust she thought what was going on in that case was. And that really left an impression on me that, the law is a powerful tool, and we can use it for bad or we can use it for good. And I try to keep Justice Ginsburg's sort of mantra in my mind whenever we're making any decision here, and throughout my legal career, to always pursue justice and to keep the human beings that are going to be affected by the law at the center of your thoughts whenever you are doing anything in this sphere.
That's a really powerful, to keep and think about when you're, all cases are presented in front of you. I guess I was wondering a little bit about the entheogen plant policy, and you first I think put out a statement soon after the resolution that was passed in Ann Arbor back in September, because you're probably going to be the prosecutor no matter what. But I guess how did you come to find out about what was going on in Ann Arbor, and what made you put out a statement so quickly soon after?
Yeah, so and I want to give a lot of credit to the Ann Arbor City Council for the bold and visionary step that they took, and you know, Ann Bannister's on this call, of course. Hi, Ann, and they deserve a lot of the credit for really spearheading this. But of course, it's the activists too that were bringing these ideas to elected leaders that that deserve the credit as well. I think I'm trying to remember because it was a busy time for me. I was in the process of transitioning into the prosecutor's office, but some folks from the activist community reached out to me and put this potential resolution by Ann Arbor City Council on my radar and said, "What do you think? We'd love to have you support it." And I read it, and as with everything, I did my research. I am, a firm opponent of the war on drugs, but I wanted to make sure that we were really considering all angles of the issue, and not doing anything that might inadvertently cause harm. And after I did that, I read a lot and talked to a lot of medical professionals about the effects of entheogenic plants and whether they cause any danger and the like. And I was comfortable saying, look, we shouldn't be prosecuting this. After Ann Arbor City Council passed the resolution that they did, it made my my statement, frankly, a lot easier because I support not charging use, possession, or small scale distribution of and cultivation of entheogenic plants, period. But boy, how arbitrary would it have been if in the aftermath of an Ann Arbor City Council resolution making it the lowest law enforcement priority in the biggest city in the county, I had turned around and brought charges against people from Ypsilanti or Ypsilanti Township or other parts of the community, that did something that would be functionally criminalized if they just, in some cases walked a few feet and were in the jurisdiction of the city of Ann Arbor. So I really give a lot of credit both to the activists and to the leaders on Ann Arbor City Council for spearheading this. I'm in full support of it, of course, but frankly, once Ann Arbor City Council did what it did, it made this a extraordinarily easy call from my end.
I really appreciate that, Elliot. So I've heard, I not directly, but I do believe you were the original source, and I think this is a really important piece for our listeners, because cities like Ypsilanti have their own police departments, have their own prosecutor, while the sheriff's department of Washtenaw and the prosecutor's office of Washtenaw won't be pursuing this. With city police that are not in the city of Ann Arbor, you could still potentially face some issues. Is that correct?
That is correct. Of course, Ann Arbor City Police is, the Ann Arbor City Council gave direction to Ann Arbor City Police to make this the lowest law enforcement priority, which is really the extent of the authority they had. And please correct me if I'm wrong, but you can't, Ann Arbor, it's a state law, and you can't, as well as federal law, but you can't like decriminalize something at the city level that has already been criminalized at the state and federal law. So what they did is they made it the lowest law enforcement priority, which basically means, if a police officer sees somebody, engaging in, a minor pedestrian safety violation, and then somebody has entheogenic plants across the street, they go to the minor pedestrian safety violation and don't prioritize the entheogenic plants. So that's what the state of play is in the city of Ann Arbor. And of course, we're not prosecuting these as state level crimes, but you should be aware that different police departments in the county can still even arrest you for entheogenic plant use, possession, cultivation, distribution. Now, the charges will go up to my office, and where appropriate, and there are some exceptions in the policy that I want to be clear about. Where appropriate, we'll just decline the charges, but the police can still do whatever they want. I don't control the police, and they work for their various jurisdictions. So folks that are engaged in this should be cautious. Be careful. We want to make sure that we're not unnecessarily bringing down the force of the criminal legal system on you and continuing and perpetuating the failed war on drugs. But you should still exercise caution and discretion. Of course, always act safely, and you should know that police, from other jurisdictions can still arrest you, and you should be aware of that, and I think try to act accordingly.
Right on. That I think will definitely help our listeners and just a lot of people understand the whole entire lowest law enforcement priority aspect of the resolution. I was wondering, what are some of the other things like your office has put forward in regards to like the war on drugs? I know you have an opiate policy, and could you get into that a little bit?
Sure. So a couple of sort of general policies around substance use. One is, marijuana is legalized for recreational use in the state of Michigan now, but there are still some sort of arbitrary, in my view, restrictions on marijuana use and possession. Namely, you can still be criminally charged for having too much marijuana, in your home, even for personal use. And so we've said, look, we're not prosecuting marijuana crimes anymore, even if it falls outside, the limits of Prop 1, unless there's really extraordinary circumstances. I will say that, if you're with any of this, I don't have, much tolerance for totally unlicensed commercial enterprises. And that's true in the substance use space. It's true sort of across the board. So, don't go running a totally, illegal, unlicensed operation. And if you don't do that, and you're not doing something like, being a 40-year-old that's selling marijuana to middle schoolers, you're not going to have a problem with our office. And, it just didn't make sense to me that you could still be criminally charged with marijuana possession because you had too much of it. If the whole point is that marijuana is as safe or safer than alcohol, we would never say, well, you got too many bottles of wine in your collection, rich person. And why would we say the same thing to somebody who has too many strains of marijuana or too much marijuana in their collection as potentially somebody who uses recreational cannabis? So that's one thing that we did. I do want to talk about the opiate policy, our buprenorphine policy. Buprenorphine is often known by the brand name Suboxone. And what buprenorphine is it is a medicine. It is a medicine that assists people that are dealing with substance use. And, you're safe to drive on buprenorphine. It helps control cravings. It is technically an opioid, but it's a partial opioid, which means that it doesn't cause the same euphoric effects as heroin or fentanyl or prescription opioids. When people are using buprenorphine, they are using it to control their cravings. Right, and they are using it because, in many cases, they are on the path to recovery. So it does not make any sense for us to turn around, and if you're using or possessing it without a prescription, or sharing it with somebody that needs it, to turn around and file criminal charges against you, because the alternative to buprenorphine, to Suboxone, is likely that the person is going to use heroin or use fentanyl, which can, of course, cause a fatal overdose. And even if it doesn't, can cause, a real setback to a person that was in recovery. So it just doesn't make any sense for us to disincentivize it. Ideally, of course, I would want buprenorphine to be used as part of a medically assisted treatment program, but we don't live in a world that always is ideal. And when somebody is faced with a choice, right, between using Suboxone, using buprenorphine, or when somebody is faced with a choice where a friend of theirs or a family member that may not have a prescription needs to control their cravings, and they're thinking, well, if I break up a little bit of my prescription Suboxone for you to help you control your cravings, I don't want criminal prosecution to be a thought in that person's mind, because the alternative is that person is very likely going to go back to fentanyl, and it really is fentanyl right now, not even heroin, and they may die. And that should be unacceptable to all of us. I'll note that a similar policy was put into place by the prosecuting attorney in Chittenden County, Vermont, which is one of the hardest hit areas of the entire country by the opioid epidemic. And after they put this policy into place, that they weren't charging buprenorphine related offenses, overdose deaths fell by 50% the following year. So this is about saving lives and harm reduction. That's really the mantra that we take for everything in the prosecutor's office.
So I work with Dance Safe here in Michigan, another harm reduction organization. I'm very glad you bring up that no at least illicit supply is clean, and that is a major concern right now in driving at our overdoses. But in terms of Suboxone, I've recently, I think we actually talked about it on Jazz Cabbage Cafe. I just, when we spoke then, spent 7 months in the Kent County jail. And, I do not need Suboxone for myself. I've been, in recovery for several years, and I've been very fortunate to have a very strong support system about that. But in jail, very few people actually can get Suboxone, and it is available. But sharing is happening. But if you get caught and you're already in jail, that hammer's coming down. Whoa. I guess I'm expressing my gratitude for taking such a progressive policy on this, because quite frankly, like you've said, the war on drugs is completely failed us. And most of my experiences as a drug policy advocate, and this policy, or this show is about drug policy, but I want to talk about some of the other things you've been doing. You've created some policies towards eliminating racial profiling, ending the school to prison pipeline, fair treatment of immigrant neighbors. Can you talk a bit about some of these policies? I know you've got a real new big project, and we'll get to that too, but can you talk about some of these policies you've done just in the few short months you've been here?
Yeah, so I'll talk about the three that you mentioned, and let's start with racial profiling, because as we've seen this week, the issues of race and policing in America remain front and center, and it remains, I think, one of the biggest issues that we as a country need to wrestle with, and the truth of the matter is that a lot of police-civilian interactions, particularly for communities of color, arise as a result of so-called pretext stops, which are often code for racial profiling. And I'll give you an example of what this means. You are driving and you commit a traffic violation. And by the way, anybody that's driving for any period of time is committing multiple traffic violations. There are so many traffic violations, it's really impossible to drive, I'm not kidding, for more than about a minute without doing something that's technically against the law. An officer can always find a reason to pull somebody over. You stayed too long in the left lane. You didn't use your turn signal for 4 seconds, whatever, right? And they pull somebody over for a traffic violation. But they don't really care about the traffic violation. The reason they pulled that person over is because they wanted to search that person's car for contraband, for drugs or guns or stolen property or whatever. And you can't just search somebody without legal justification. But one way that you can get legal justification, even if there is no evidence that a crime actually occurred or that there might be evidence of a crime, is simply to ask and get that person's consent. So what happens is that officer pulls you over, they come around to your driver's side window and they say, you mind if I just look around the car a little bit? And most people don't feel like they say no. You can always say no. I want people to know that you can always say no if an officer asks you a question and asks for consent. But most people, a uniformed officer with a gun standing in front of you, you don't feel like you really have the ability to say no. And Black people and people of color are disproportionately subject to this type of stop. This is where racial profiling comes from. It's not that officers care more about Black people speeding, or Black people failing to use their turn signal for 4 seconds, or Black people driving the left lane for too long. They are using these stops nationwide as fishing expeditions to gain consent to search cars. Now, sometimes it may turn up that there is evidence of a crime, but in a great many cases, that's not the case. The car is searched, nothing is found, and the person is allowed to go on their way. But that causes severe dignitary harm, severe trauma to communities when you're getting pulled over and you know that it's going to be an elongated stop, and you're likely been singled out for suspicion because of your race. And look, I've been pulled over before because I don't know how to use traffic circles very well, and I always screw up there. But whenever I'm pulled over, I've never thought that the search is going to last, or the stop is going to last longer than a couple of seconds, a few minutes, and it's going to end in anything other than me getting a speeding ticket at worst and going on my way. Everybody should be entitled to that same minor sense of annoyance at best, right? Because nobody likes getting pulled over, but nobody should feel as though they've been singled out as a result of their race. This really erodes any semblance of trust between law enforcement and communities of color. So what we said in our policy is, look, we know these stops are harmful. They escalate tensions a lot of time between police and the folks that they are stopping, which can lead to violence and tragedy, right? And they really erode the fabric of our community. So what we said is, look, we're not interested in these contraband crimes, possession of drugs, stolen property, et cetera, that stem from these pretext stops. If you pull somebody over for a traffic violation, you get consent to search their car, and you got no other reason to search their car, you know, as long as it's just like we're not going to ignore a murder weapon. Obviously, there's got to be some limits. But if it's drugs, if it's stolen property, you know, if you didn't have your license on you for a concealed carry permit, we're not interested in those charges because we want to discourage these types of fishing expeditions. Does it mean that we get a few fewer cases? Probably. But what it really means is that we are cutting back on the significant harm that racial profiling has caused in our communities. And I have to say that I'm grateful to be working, frankly, with law enforcement in Washtenaw County because we rolled out this policy, and this might have caused a firestorm elsewhere. But we previewed it with our law enforcement partners. And by and large, at least police leadership has said, you know, not only are we fine with that, we agree, because we don't want our officers going out and engaging in this type of racial profiling and pretext stops either, because it makes the entire profession of policing much more difficult when communities do not trust us. So we're grateful for the leadership that law enforcement has in Washtenaw County on that. And some jurisdictions even said, you know, not only do I not have a problem with this, please tell us whenever you're denying a charge based on this policy in our jurisdiction, because we want to know and we want to course correct. And if that happens, that's unacceptable to us, which is partnership that I appreciate. So moving on to juvenile justice, you know, look, I mentioned this briefly earlier. I was an 8th grade U.S. history teacher. I actually love adolescents. I think 13 and 14-year-olds are great and funny, and really, you know, their moral intuitions are developing. So I love teaching them history. They also do stupid things sometimes, right? Kids do dumb things, and kids do engage in risk-seeking behavior, and that's where they're at in terms of neurological development. We should not be criminalizing run-of-the-mill adolescent and youthful misbehavior. School fights, they happen. They happened when I was in high school, right? Statute of limitations over, I got in some school fights, right? I never got sent to the juvenile detention center. I was never involved in the juvenile system. And I know in many ways, that's because I'm privileged and I have white skin, and I get the benefit of the doubt as a young white guy that many children who don't look like me do not get. So what we said is, look, for a whole host of things, minor school-based misbehavior, you get in a fight, you're stealing something from an 8th grader steals something from a classmate's backpack, right? Stuff like that. Handle that at the school level. I'm not saying there should be no consequences for kids or that you can't course correct, but it doesn't require the criminal justice system and the prosecutor to get involved. Same with, the sort of low-level experimentation with substances. Kids do this, and white kids get away with it all of the time, right? It's a normal part of white adolescence, and we need to apply the same benefit of the doubt that we give to white kids to everybody, because kids are kids no matter who they are. Now, obviously, we can, for more serious cases, we do have to intervene at some level, but for this sort of typical adolescent experimentation, misbehavior, we do a lot worse at getting the justice system involved, and data proves this. If you go into the juvenile detention center, it actually makes it significantly more likely that you're going to commit a future crime than if we just did nothing. So we're actually being counterproductive by trying to course correct in that way, and that's sort of our philosophy on juvenile justice. And then with respect to non-citizens, we put together a very comprehensive policy around a whole host of non-citizen related issues. And I want to be clear, this is really a public safety measure. So we said, look, we are not cooperating or collaborating with ICE, and I don't care that Joe Biden is president right now. We're not doing federal immigration enforcement. It's just not our job. And we need to build trust in the communities that we serve. And the data shows that you are very unlikely to report a crime, even a serious crime, or to serve in a witness in a criminal case if you are a non-citizen, and because you fear cooperation and collaboration with ICE, and that scrutiny may not even result in you being deported, but may result in your friends, your families, your loved ones, people in your community being deported. We want to prosecute the rapes and the shootings and the physical violence, but if we don't have folks that are willing to report that because they're scared of immigration authorities, if we don't have folks that are willing to serve as witnesses because they're scared of anything touching the criminal legal system, we can't prosecute those more serious crimes. We also said that we are going to prioritize the provision of T visas and U visas, which are special visas for non-citizens who cooperate with federal, or not federal, cooperate with law enforcement on serious crime investigations. And then T visas are for trafficking victims. A lot of times non-citizens are subject to human trafficking precisely because they're non-citizens, because their immigration status is being held over them. So we've made the provision of those special visas the highest priority in our office. And by the way, on the trafficking piece, we just announced this last week, a partnership with the University of Michigan Human Trafficking Law Clinic, to where, if you are a trafficking survivor or victim and you come into our office, whether you're a non-citizen or whether you're a citizen, you are going to have a lawyer from the Human Trafficking Clinic that will independently represent all of your interests, public benefits, immigration, family matters, helping clear up old criminal records. And we're committed to doing everything that we can on our end to expunge those old criminal records, to provide those special visas, to make sure that survivors of human trafficking are able to move forward, and for non-citizens to stay in this country. The other thing that we did on immigration is the consequences of a charge, of a state level criminal charge for non-citizens can be very severe. Something that wouldn't even result in jail time for me as a citizen could cause somebody to be deported from this country. And that's true even if they're a lawful permanent resident and have been here for decades. They can be ripped from their community for something that wouldn't even cause jail time because it's not all that serious if I did it. And what we did, and we worked with the Michigan Immigrant Rights Center, which put together a guide for prosecutors, is we said, look, we are taking stock of the real world immigration consequences of any potential conviction, and we're going to modify the charges where appropriate to make sure that we're not imposing severe and draconian consequences on people simply because they're non-citizens. There's a philosophy in prosecution like, well, you can't treat non-citizens differently than citizens. You just have to ignore the immigration consequences. That is, in my mind, unjustifiable. because it is a severe real world consequence if you're taking somebody who may have been here for 20 years, who may have to go back to a country where they face persecution. In some cases, it may be the literal death penalty to send somebody back to their home country they may have fled from as a refugee, to just ignore those real circumstances to a person and their family if they're in there for something like a drug case. You cannot do that. And our office now has an immigration conscious policy. Obviously, look, if you murder somebody, there's no appropriate charge other than murder. But where possible and where consistent with public safety, we're taking stock of immigration consequences, and we're making sure that we're not imposing unnecessarily draconian consequences.
That is really cool that you're pushing that. I have a quick question. I guess how can people who aren't in Washtenaw County push their prosecuting attorneys or district attorneys to push more progressive policies? How can we talk to them?
Well, a couple things. One is, of course, this is an elected position. And so you should demand, if somebody's running for this office, demand answers on concrete policy questions from your prosecutor. I'll say here in Washtenaw County, we had a group of local activists who were, concerned about mass incarceration and racial inequity. And they put out a very comprehensive survey, which, basically deposed the prosecutor candidates and asking, will you check yes or no to a variety of these questions. Michigan Liberation and the ACLU did a similar thing with prosecutor candidates statewide. So try to nail prosecutor candidates down on this stuff. I think that this is, we're at a point right now where people are thinking differently about the criminal legal system. And so sometimes, you can say nice words and nice rhetoric and say, I don't believe that anybody should be rotting in prison because of marijuana. Well, that's not really happening, frankly. In a lot of cases, especially now that it's legalized. And so if you say you want reform as a prosecutor candidate, I think activists can and should nail them down on what exactly does that mean. Are you gonna say, no, we're not prosecuting entheogenic plants or buprenorphine? What are you gonna do about pretext stops and racial inequities? What's your philosophy on juvenile justice? Are you gonna, all the stuff we talked about, are you going to have a immigration conscious prosecutor's office? So I would say that is probably the most important thing, is at election time, ask very specific questions to prosecutor candidates, and put them on the spot and have them make promises. Because if you have them make promises and they don't do it, well, then they need to be held accountable at the next election. So I think a lot of activist groups across the country have been organizing around this, and they've been very successful in moving the agenda forward by getting prosecutor candidates to commit to something and then demanding that they follow through.
I appreciate that perspective.
I just had a
go for it.
About the absolvement of debts that people have with Washtenaw County. Can you elaborate more on that policy that you passed?
So again, we're lucky to have great partners here in Washtenaw County. That was not me, and so credit where credit's due. That was the sheriff that forgave all jail debt for folks that had served some time in the jail, and it was over $500,000 in debt that was hanging over people's heads, and it was debt that was incurred when you were in jail and you used services or goods that came from the jail, and a lot of times people can't pay that, and it can be a real hindrance in reentry, right? Because you've got this debt hanging over your head, and you're trying to build your life back up. It could affect your ability to get housing and provide a stable life, which, by the way, makes it less likely that you're going to commit crime if you're able to do that. And so Jerry Clayton, and who I totally support, but I had nothing to do with. I want to make that clear. And credit.
I think all your policies probably just rubbed off on him a little bit. Honestly,
and I'll say this forthrightly. Jerry Clayton is probably one of the more, if not the most progressive sheriff in the country. And you know, we have a great working relationship. You know, again, I'm grateful that we have partners in Washtenaw County that are moving in the direction of reform. So I don't think he needed the push from me. I think he knew it was the right thing to do. He's very focused on reentry and has been even before I got into office. So I think we got to give him credit for that excellent move.
Thanks for
No, I did have a curiosity because I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but has your office also applied a similar policy toward non-prosecution, similar to the entheogenics and certain opiates towards sex work of certain kinds? And would you be able to talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, harm reduction, right? We know that there is often a lot of sexual assault, physical assault that goes on in the sex work industry, right? And I want to be really clear about what we are saying we're prosecuting, what we're not. We are still going after traffickers. We are still going after anybody who seeks to purchase sex from a trafficked person or from a minor. We are going after physical assault and sexual assault that is adjacent to the sex work industry. But if we want to go after that, we got to know about it, right? And if a sex worker fears that you are going to turn around and prosecute them for technically breaking the law, if they report a sexual assault, if they report a physical assault, if they are being trafficked and you know, want an off-ramp, right? They are going to be significantly less likely to ever report that. And those who would take advantage of sex workers know this, right? And that's what allows them often to traffic people or you know, to engage in sexual assault or physical assault against sex workers. So what we said is we will not prosecute you. We're not turning around and prosecuting you if you report these serious crimes to us. And we're not going to engage in surveillance or harassment against you either. We need to build the trust of the communities that we serve if we're going to go after these serious crimes. And that's what our sex work policy is all about. And you know, we made this policy after conversations with actual sex workers. And this is a community that, by virtue of criminalization, often feels as though they are unable to come forward. They are unable to have conversations. They are unable to talk openly about what they need. And so it takes building trust. But we spoke to sex workers. We said, what do you need? What do you need to feel safe? What would make you safer, and what would make you feel more comfortable reporting to police if you are the victim of a crime? And they said, don't go after, you know, the folks that engage in violent and sexual assault and trafficking 100%, but don't turn around and make us subject to prosecution and you know, to potential harassment by law enforcement or to surveillance, because that just pushes us further into the shadows, for one, which makes sex work even more risky and even more fraught with violence. And second of all, we would never report anything if we fear prosecution or surveillance. And why would you? You know, I want to also mention this. We keep making these same mistakes over and over again and adopting prohibitionist policies. Prohibitionist policies don't ever work. We think that something is either morally bad or causes harm, and we try to address it through the criminal legal system by criminalizing it. Well, what did you see with alcohol? Prohibition. You saw violence attached to the alcohol trade skyrocket. What did we see with the war on drugs? We saw violence associated with a drug trade skyrocket. It is the same thing with sex work. When you make something criminal, it necessarily takes place further and further in the shadows. People do not feel as though they are comfortable reporting violence, and that increases the violence and coercion and risk to folks that are engaged in that activity. And by the way, it hasn't worked. Prohibition of alcohol didn't make people stop drinking. Prohibition of drugs didn't make people stop using drugs. Prohibition of sex work has not stopped sex work. All it does is make it more dangerous for the people that are involved, which is why, you know, something resembling our policy, and actually, you know, some organizations want to go even further, but something resembling our policy is supported by the ACLU, by Amnesty International, by Human Rights Watch, from every major human rights organization across the country, as well as, by the way, the World Health Organization, the United Nations Commission on AIDS, and the Lancet, which is, you know, the premier medical journal in the world, because the other aspect of this is public health. If you have no bargaining leverage because you know that you could be criminalized as a sex worker, you can't insist on condom usage. And that's why, you know, to quote the Lancet, the researchers looked at that and they said the single best thing worldwide that we can do to stop the spread of HIV in the next decade is to decriminalize sex work, because it makes it far more likely that condom use is going to occur, because sex workers don't fear prosecution. They know they have an avenue to go to for help. And, you know, folks don't feel as empowered given that vulnerability to engage in violence, to engage in sexual assault, or, you know, in this case, to not use a condom despite a sex worker's expressed wishes. And by the way, I want to say, I keep talking about this. Two more things. We're the only prosecutor's office in the state that has expressly said that we are going to charge sexual assault in those cases in which a sex worker insists on condom usage and a buyer doesn't use it. We'll charge that as sexual assault, and I think that's totally appropriate. You're not consenting to touch without a condom. You're consenting to touch with a condom. And furthermore, we'll charge sexual assault if anybody purchases sex from a sex worker and doesn't pay them. So this is really about facilitating reporting and going after these more serious crimes that cause harm, that reduce public health impact, and that make all of us less safe.
Yeah, I do want to mention one interesting case study with regards to a regulated sex work model that managed to almost completely halt HIV/AIDS transmissions was in Thailand. And I don't know, that's not necessarily where we should look for a model, an effective model of sex work, but I know that they were seeing HIV/AIDS transmission spiking early on during that epidemic, and they mandated a 100% condom use policy. And because a lot of the I guess quote unquote brothels there actually pay taxes and are regulated and have oversight, they all pretty much mandated that, and the country saw HIV/AIDS transmissions pretty much just flatline right after that.
Well, you want an example that's even closer to home. And by the way, I want to say, I want to make this clear. We're just saying we're not pursuing charges. Brothels, just like any commercial establishment, you can't open a brothel in Washtenaw County. That's an illegal establishment. We'll prosecute that. We're also, we're continuing to go after pimps and traffickers and the third party involvement in the sex trade. But on the public health point, closer to home, a lot of people don't know about this. Rhode Island accidentally decriminalized sex work, indoor sex work, during the 2000s. The legislature was trying to do something else, and they accidentally decriminalized indoor sex work. And judges looked at the law that they passed, and they said, yeah, indoor sex work doesn't carry criminal consequences. And because it was sort of accidental, right, and this sort of came on the radar, it provided the perfect case study for a before and after evaluation of the effects. What did you see in Rhode Island? Gonorrhea rates, which is the most common sexually transmitted infection, especially in sex work, but generally too. Gonorrhea rates in Rhode Island fell by 40%, which is a staggering number, right? And they fell even most dramatically in the areas where sex work was most common, which is always the sort of major metropolitan areas. Interestingly too, sexual assault rates fell by 31% in Rhode Island during that time. And the folks that ran this study have looked at the numbers every which way. Crime didn't fall generally. Sexual assault rates didn't fall in sort of neighboring control states, nor did gonorrhea rates. So it really is directly tied to the accidental decriminalization of sex work. And by the way, this is score one for the public health experts, because that is exactly what the doctors at the World Health Organization, at UNAIDS, and the Lancet have suggested would happen if we see sex work decriminalizations, is that we see a dramatic decline in the rates of sexually transmitted infections.
That is fascinating, and thanks for bringing up the anti-prohibitionist impetus for some of these policies, because that's sort of the angle at which I was really kind of approaching it, or just bringing sex work into this conversation, and definitely echoed some attitudes that I share, and I really appreciate hearing that.
Of course.
This is absolutely amazing. We haven't even touched what you've done yet. I want to talk about you just started a PAC. You just started a one of its kind program with the ACLU. We've been taking a bunch of your time, so we're coming up on what theoretically should be the end of our show too. But there's just so much to talk about. Is there anything else you want to mention?
Well, so I'll briefly touch on both those things. We have a first of its kind partnership with the ACLU and the University of Michigan Law School to drill down and identify every point in the system in our prosecutor's office where you see people of color be treated differently than white people for similar conduct. We're going to be transparent about this. We're going to publish all of the results on our website. We can't stick our head in the sand any longer and pretend like racial inequity doesn't exist. So the ACLU and U of M researchers have total access to our files. We're not hiding anything. We're going to be transparent. And then we're going to, once we identify the points in the system where we see racial inequity, we are going to eliminate it. The PAC, I'm glad you gave me an opportunity to plug the PAC because folks, this is a team effort, and I've talked about our great partners, including, Councilmember Bannister and the Ann Arbor City Council, which led this work on entheogenic plants. We got a chance to touch on our sheriff who's doing progressive things and our law enforcement partners in Washtenaw County. This is a team effort. We've been doing a lot in the prosecutor's office, but we need champions of criminal justice reform at every level of government across the state if we are going to enact real and meaningful change. So my chief assistant prosecutor, Victoria Burton Harris, who is amazing, and myself, we started a PAC. We launched it this week. It's called the Pursuit of Justice PAC. If you go to pursuitofjusticepac.com, you can make a founding donation so we can get this money out to candidates across the state that support real criminal justice reform measures, because again, this is a team sport. Prosecutors are important, but we're just one actor in the system. We need city councils to do what Ann Arbor City Council did. We need sheriffs to do what Sheriff Jerry Clayton did. We need legislators to change our laws. So pursuitofjusticepac.com, and the name of the PAC, because we talked about, I'll go first full circle. The name of the PAC is an homage to Justice Ginsburg, who in her chambers had a print with the verse from the Hebrew Bible. She was of course Jewish, as am I. And the verse was, "Justice, justice shall you pursue." And so that's, was her mantra in life. And our PAC name is in homage to my idol, the late Justice Ginsburg. So pursuitofjusticepac.com. Make a donation, please, if you're able.
I guess I have one more quick question. When you running for president? Thank you, Ellie, so much for being on the show today. I know Kelsey's not here anymore, but thank you to Kelsey Taylor. Nick, thank you so much. You're always welcome on the show. And Jim, Colin, anything else before we go?
I don't think so. It was a great show.
I got something.
Thank you so much, guys, for coming on today, Nick and Ellie.
Yes.
Tomorrow at the what is it called? The Golden Goddess Tasting Room at
the Triple Goddess Tasting Room
Whoa.
Mish. Yeah, I will be there too. MPS and Unity Vibration Kombucha Company are doing a special event. There will be live music. There will be social distancing. There will be masks. And there will be a brand new kombucha chaga stout. So come check us out. That's tomorrow night. I do not know the time off the top of my head.
I think it starts at 6.
Okay. And as always, follow us, Decrim Nature Michigan, the Entheo Show, Michigan Psychedelic Society. Thank you, everybody. We will see you in 2 weeks.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
folks.
I'll see you on the other side on Monday.